Welcome. Today is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. It is 3 p.m. I'd like to call to order the meeting. Resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Greater Madawaska calls to order the October 17th, 2024 regular council meeting at 3 p.m.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Popke, and second by Councillor Tripp. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Please stand for O Canada. Thank you. Please be seated. As we gather in chambers, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we're meeting on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many continued displays of friendship. We'd also like to thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Thank you. Section 4.1, approval of agenda. Resolution, please.
That the agenda of the council meeting of October 17th, 2024 be approved as amended. Addition, item 12.2, OPP funding, resolution of support.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Levesque. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Section 5.1, approval of minutes. Resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the following minutes are approved by council September 19th, 2024 regular meeting.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second by Councillor Popke. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Section 5.2, accepting minutes, please. Resolution.
Be it resolved that the following minutes are accepted by council July 30th, 2024 Recreation and Culture Committee.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? There are none seen. On to section 7. Since our last meeting, I have attended 8 meetings representing the Township of Greater Madawaska and 6 community events. On Thursday, September 26, 2024, our CAO, Renee Mask, and I attended the Makwa Community Center for a meeting with the Algonquins of Peknognagon First Nations. Chief Zaran spoke about the community and their governance processes and their opportunities and challenges. It was extremely well attended, and the presentation was fabulous. And having a better understanding of their corporate governance, the structure is very, very strong. So I want to thank the chief for having us there. Unfortunately, on the same day, on September 26, 2024, we lost a member of our community. Jim McBain died suddenly in a motor vehicle collision. Jim was the husband of Darla, loving father of Allison and David, and grandfather to 3. Jim was the former police chief of the town of Renfrew and the owner of Municipal Law Enforcement Service and a valued member of our community. His leadership and dedication to all of us the impact will be felt for many years. On behalf of council and the staff of the Township at Greater Madawaska, we extend our condolences to Jim McBain's wife, Darla, family, friends, and the entire MLES team. You'll be missed, Jim. I would like to mention, although Leonard is not here today, I'd like to mention the efforts of Leonard and his staff. Renfrew County Health has given us a clean bill of health on the water at the Calabogie Community Center. It is now potable. And now we also have to remember this is still well water. To some people that aren't used to drinking well water, it still might taste funny, but it is now safe to drink. So I thank Leonard and his team for getting that done for us. Tomorrow morning, I will be addressing the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, welcoming them to our township. And I'll also be promoting what our township has to offer, the people, the places to stay, the events, and everything else that I could possibly think about promoting our township to them. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus is a nonprofit organization advocating for 103 small towns and rural municipalities across Eastern Ontario. The area covered is 50,000 square miles, serving 800,000 residents. For more than 20 years, Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus has gained support and momentum by speaking with a united voice to champion region municipalities' priorities, works with government, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and Indigenous leaders, the media, and the public. Now, further to that, I'd just like to advise staff and the residents of Greater Madawaska that on October 15th, 2024, I submitted my documentation to run for County or Renfrew Warden for 2025. The election will take place in Renfrew County Council meeting on December 10th, and I will follow up with the results of that once it's been done. I thank you for your time. We'll now move on to Section 8, Public Works Department, 8.1.
That council approves bylaw 54-2024 to authorize speed limits within the township of Greater Madawaska, and that council repeal bylaw 68-2024 being the speed limit bylaw.
Okay, do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Tripp. Background, please.
So the current speed limit bylaw was adopted by council in October 2022. I've had some concerns raised about the speed limit being too high on Graphite Bay Road and Bluff Point Road with all the pedestrians. After looking at the bylaw and driving the roads, I feel that Graphite Bay should remain 40 kilometers in the first 2.2 kilometers of the road, and then where the development is, where all the houses along the water are, we will drop it to a 30-kilometer zone. Bluff Point should be brought down to a 40-kilometer zone like the neighboring roads around with the same amount of development as well. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from council? Councillor Popke? Sorry.
I got a question for Steve, I guess. What does it typically cost to put one of these speed limit signs out on a road?
Usually you're probably looking at close to $100 for the post and sign.
Okay. Because I have a lot of people question me or question a 30 speed limit sign. Realistically, nobody's going to be doing 30. It's an easy road to drive on, lots of visibility and accessibility, and they just feel like they should not be driving 30 kilometers an hour.
Okay, thank you. Just I'm going to do a quick follow-up to that, supplemental to that. When I saw this on the report, I actually drove Graphite Bay Road, and I have a Jeep, and I think driving, I know it's scheduled for our asset management plan, and I do see that we do a lot of repairs of just filling potholes and such, but I would find it very hard for somebody to actually go over 30 kilometers in some of the areas there right now. So I think we need to look at the road itself, but as far as the 30 kilometer and the 40 kilometer, I personally think it's appropriate just in the way the road is right now. And Councillor Thompson, you had a question?
Actually, to follow up on what you said, so are you saying that just the fact that we've got all these built-in speed bumps is enough to bring the traffic down, that we don't need a sign, or
No, I'm saying that I think the sign is warranted.
is warranted? Okay. Okay, and, yeah, I was just wondering, is there a posted, the sign for the four-wheelers and whatnot? Is that 20 kilometers through the whole township, or does it, if you bring it down to 30, does the ATV speed limit come down? Like,
Well, if it's
how
not
does that work?
signed, if it's not signed for the ATV speed limit, they drive the same as the traffic,
Oh, okay.
the
So,
normal
yeah.
traffic. But you can, like the village here, they have it signed for four-wheelers and they drop the speed limit down for the ATVs.
Okay, so otherwise, it's just the speed limit
Yeah.
is the limit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It's 4-1, carried. Thank you. So on to section 9, 9.1, building permit report, information item. That will be, Chris, you're delivering that to us?
Okay, so this memo was just to update council on how many permits have been issued so far in 2024. And it shows a comparison of from 2023 up to the same date. So that would be till the end of September. And it shows the revenues collected from the permits and the revenue collected from the development charges also on the new builds. You can see that they have been increased by, the revenue has increased by quite a bit, just in fact that the charges were increased last year. Permit numbers are down slightly from 2023, but like I said, the revenue has increased significantly because of the fee charges by law increase.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from council? I have, seeing none from anyone else, I have an education question I need to ask. When I was going through this, I see 2024, we have new construction of 27, and we have sewage of 0. Is that because the sewage is part of the new construction bill? Or build, or
So
how?
on every new septic system or even a replacement septic system has its own permit. They're applied by separate and issued separately. So I'm not sure that's the way our software, I guess, calculates it. But if you look down further, it shows sewage permits down further underneath the renovations. I'm not sure. Maybe that's something we can look at for the software to update that more correctly. So this report is generated from our building permit software that we use. It's maybe we can look into see why it's calculating it that way. I'm not sure if it's a issue from their technical department or I did notice that, and it seems a little confusing, but the sewage is.
Yeah, I saw that there was 34 sewage down further, and I was just
Yeah.
trying to get the connection.
And like I said, they are separate. They're a totally separate permit. Fees are collected separately, everything for sewage compared to building.
Okay, so possibly where sewage is there, under new construction might be,
So it would compare, if there's 27 new homes,
Yeah.
obviously because we have no town services, there would be 27 new sewage systems installed because we don't issue a new construction without a sewage permit at the same time.
thank you. I just wanted to clarify that and see if we can, because when I was reading it, it confused me, which didn't take much. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? No. And this is an information item, so thank you, Chris. We will now move on to 9.2 River Lane Estates. Resolution, please.
That council endorse the proposed conditions of draft plan approval for plan of subdivision condominium 47T-24-24001, 47CD-24002.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Thompson. Background, please, and I believe we're going to Kent for the background, are we, today?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I saw your head move, so I figured you could hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Weir, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So this report is in regards to a plan of subdivision and condominium. at part of lot 17, concession 2 in geographic township of Bagot. It's municipal address is 322 Lower Spruce Hedge Road. The subdivision was received by the county, or the subdivision application and condominium applications were received by the county in January of this year, and were processed in the usual manner. And the proposals for a 26 lot plan of subdivision that would be accessed by a plan of condominium road, so a common element road. The 26 lots would front on the Madawaska River, so the south bank of the river. So this is, just for context, this is located just southwest of Burnstown in McNabb Braeside. So it's right at the boundary of the two municipalities, so the Township of Greater Madawaska and McNabb Braeside. So the access would be from this condo road, and the condo road would connect to Lower Spruce Hedge Road. And of course, the subdivision would be serviced with private septic and wells. So as these applications were being processed or going through the process of review, at some point, I guess this was about a month and a half ago, the applicant had decided to appeal a non-decision of the applications. So the county, under the Planning Act, has 120 days to make a decision upon receipt of the applications. They have 120 days to make a decision whether for or against in regards to the application. They had not done that. So the applicant appealed the non-decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So once it was appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the tribunal becomes the approval authority. So it's taken out of the county's hands and in sort of indirectly taken out of the township's hands. Now, as council's aware, the township isn't the approval authority for subdivisions and condominiums. However, that these applications are sort of subject to your scrutiny in some ways, where they're brought to you. We have peer reviewers such as Cambium such as Engage, that look at the stormwater and that sort of thing. So what's happened now it's with the tribunal. It's awaiting a case management conference. So in anticipation of this going through the tribunal process and eventually likely going to a hearing, the township wants to be in a position where we can provide our comments, and essentially that comes through these draft plan conditions that we put before you today. The draft plan conditions are typical of any other draft plan conditions for plans of subdivision that you would see in the township. In this case, there are some special conditions related to the condominium road and access to Lower Spruce Hedge Road along municipal road allowance that's shared with the adjacent township. But aside from that, they're fairly standard conditions. And as I've noted in the report, we want to be sure that those conditions are put forward for tribunal's consideration so that our interests are protected, or the township's interests are protected. So that's essentially what we put forward to you today, is just to endorse those conditions so that we have them ready when we put them forward as evidence at the tribunal. And as I pointed out, we're still awaiting a case management conference. So the case management conference is the next step in that tribunal process, and that's just outlining who the parties are. So the parties are those that can call witnesses and submit evidence. So those would typically be the municipalities and the applicant. And it also sets out hearing dates and a schedule for the hearing, or pardon me, a issues list for the hearing. So that's the next step. We aren't aware of that being scheduled as of yet, but once it is, we'll keep council posted as to that process. So that's essentially it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kent. Any questions from council? Councillor Thompson?
Could you outline what the reason for the delay was?
So through the mayor to Councillor Thompson, my understanding is that the township of McNabb Braeside had concerns with access to the proposed subdivision, as traffic would be coming in primarily from Burnstown Road and then along Lower Spruce Edge Road, which is within the township of McNabb Rayside. And it's my understanding that council for the township had issues with that access and was looking to the applicant to provide potentially some upgrades to that road. And part of the reason for appealing this, as my understanding, and I don't know, I'm not the person appealing, I'm not the party appealing it, but that's part of my understanding is that that's what was the reason for appealing it, the non-decision, and that a decision had not been made yet.
Thank you. Supplemental? Oh, your mic, please.
Since McNabb Brayside's, their concerns were that the nearest fire department is actually in their township. And if anyone from this area commutes to work, it's likely they'll be going through their township, extra wear and tear. Will they be at the tribunal to bring up those issues? And just the placement, whether or not they agree with the placement of the subdivision to begin with?
So through the mayor, I am anticipating that they will. I don't know for sure. So what happens is at the case management conference, the tribunal determines parties and participants. So parties, as I said, are those entities that can call witnesses and essentially present a case, right? And participants are those that simply just submit a letter and it's considered by the tribunal. In this case, my thinking is that they will be a party because they will want to call witnesses and make a case either for or against or participate in settlement discussions as well, which a party status would allow them to do that. So I don't know for sure because I'm not, of course, don't know. That's up to them, right? So, but my thinking is that they likely would be.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Levesque.
Thanks for the report, Kent. Just a couple of questions. The conditions that we see here, which look like they're pretty standard, is this a different process because of the tribunal, or are the conditions themselves different because of that?
Through the mayor, it's a different process. So the conditions themselves, it hasn't compelled us to make different conditions. We've gone through, at least from the township's point of view, our review is essentially, our technical review is essentially complete. Engage had reviewed the civil works and they essentially signed off on them. So they're standard conditions that you would see with most subdivisions, plans of subdivision in the township. It's just that the process is different now. You're getting it in a different way. You're getting this information in a different way because we want to ensure that evidence is there front and center and available for the tribunal to review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Popke.
This condominium road where the 26 buildings are going on, currently the gentleman, is it a boundary line between McNabb and Brayside and Greater Madawaska the whole way in that they're building these on, or is it all just sort of McNabb Brayside or Greater Madawaska?
So through the mayor, I'm not sure if we can, am I able to share my screen?
We'll turn to our clerk for that. Yes, and she's nodding yes.
Okay. One moment. I can just bring the plan up so you can see it. There we go. Perfect. So everyone should be able to see that now. So these are the 26 lots here. This is the road allowance that is the boundary between McNabb Brayside and Greater Madawaska. And then Lower Spruce Edge Road goes along. You can see it running along here. Can everybody see my cursor, by the way?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect. Good. So then it goes down here, and then it jogs this way to the east and goes towards Burnstown Road. So the condominium road will go within this road allowance, that is shared between the two municipalities. And then it cuts off here. This is shown as block 27 on the plan, and cuts off. And then now everything west of this road allowance is within the township of Greater Madawaska. So the entire development, save and except this portion of the condominium road, which is within that shared road allowance, is within Greater Madawaska.
Thank you. Any supplemental?
Well, I just had a quick question then on one of the conditions. Says that we need to put a lamppost somewhere in here. Who's going to be paying for that lamppost and having to run all the time? Would that be the township, or would that be the private condominium section?
Through the chair, that would be the condominium that would be
Okay.
responsible for that.
Perfect.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you. And Kent, just it's a municipal boundary road that is shared 50-50 by McNabb Braeside and Greater Madawaska. So what do you, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you know the length of the actual shared portion of that road?
The shared portion of which the road is going to be used, like the road allowance, the portion of the road allowance that the condo road is using.
Yes.
That's your question?
Yes.
Well, I could probably, if I look in here, it looks like it's about, I'd say about 150, 300, no, sorry, about 200 meters or so.
200. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're talking about the shared road is 200 meters. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Just
200
want to get that on the
200 to
record.
250 meters, yeah.
Thank you. And I noticed one of the conditions that we've put in there is to meet the private road standards of the Township of Greater Madawaska. And I understand it's worded that way because McNabb Braeside does not have a private road standard.
Correct. Yes, and yeah, it's good that you pointed that out because it was our intention to ensure that those standards were up to Greater Madawaska standards.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Thompson.
Is it common to have, through you, of course, is it common to have, for a township to have a standard for private roads that only applies when a condominium is being put in, condominium road is being put in, but doesn't apply for existing roads? Like how, I don't quite understand. Did we develop that? I probably should ask you, did we develop that standard for this case?
No, so we developed a standard to have a standard. A lot of places, like McNabb Braeside doesn't have a standard, but they follow TAC. So they follow the provincial's guidelines. So we want to provide our guideline. It aligns with other municipalities that have private road standards guideline. If not, you would still have a guideline. You would just follow the provincial guidelines. So we brought it to council last August, I want to say, to be able to provide a standard so that we're able to rely on it in these types of situations where you have developments coming in with private roads and without a standard, it's hard to really enforce what your requirement is. So this provides a requirement for it.
And this standard, this standard would apply to all new private roads, regardless of whether it's a condominium or?
That's correct. Right now, we go through, the intent is to be able to use it with new subdivisions that come through and have a requirement for it. And we are enforcing it. We have people that have come forward with pre-consultation and couldn't meet the standards, therefore the application couldn't proceed.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I'll call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you, Kent.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
You too. Well, now, excuse me, 9.3, bylaw 52-2024, deeming bylaw lot. Resolution, please.
The council approves bylaw 52-2024 being a bylaw to deem lot 7 of Plan 538 not to be part of a registered plan of subdivision.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Popke. Background, please. Kristen, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, before council is a deeming bylaw, which is a bylaw that will essentially deem Lot 7 of Plan 538 not to be a registered plan of subdivision. The property is currently subject to a consent application for which, for a lot line adjustment, for which a deeming bylaw is a condition.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from council? Councillor Thompson.
So basically, they just want Lot 6 and 7 to be one lot now, a larger lot, or?
No, so what they're doing is they're doing a lot line adjustment. So they have the property owner has 2 adjacent lots, and the neighboring lot, they're taking a portion of that lot and adding it onto their current lot. But in order for them to be able to make that lot line adjustment, you have to remove the lot out of a plan of subdivision in order for it to be further subdivided.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have a quick question. When I look at this plan, it looks like Lot 7, if I'm reading it right, is on Winsome Court? Is that, am I getting that wrong, or?
No, that's correct. I think there was some civic addressing issues
Okay.
that arose, I guess, originally when the building permit was probably issued back in I think early 2000s. I'm not sure exactly when it was constructed, but yes, there will be an issue if the applicants were ever to sell the property that their current access comes off of on Barrett Chute. They will have to find another alternate access off Winsome Court, as technically that should be their legal access, as the frontage is on Winsome Court.
Okay, thank you. I just needed clarity on that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hearing the background, call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. Excuse me. Now on to 9.4, bylaw 55-24, acquisition and assumption of lands on public highway, Murphy Road. Resolution, please.
That council approves bylaw 55-2024 for the acquisition and assumption as a public highway, a portion of Murphy Road designated as part 2, 3, 5, and 6 on reference plan 49R-20786.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Popke, second by Councillor Tripp. Background, please. Kristen?
Thank you. So this is just another standard road assumption. We're looking at assuming some small portions of Murphy Road that front along 5258 Murphy Road. So this assumption is a condition of consent. Sometimes through consent, the township is able to impose conditions. In this case, we've imposed a condition for the property owner to have a portion of Murphy Road surveyed, and then the township would assume those essentially at no cost to the township. And so in this case, because we are the owner of the majority of the road, they've only had to survey a small portion essentially for road widening. So we owned a small portion, but we didn't own the extent beyond the 20 meters. So that's why we're only assuming a very small portion. So down the line, if we ever wanted to upgrade the road and we needed areas required for road widening, in this case, we wouldn't be required to go door to door to property owners to look at conveying lands for the widening of these roads. So this is just a condition that we can impose and ensure we get those lands during that time.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns, discussion from council? There are none seen. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you, Kristen. Moving on to 10.1, bylaw 53-2024, procurement policy. Resolution, please.
That council approve bylaw 53-2024 being a bylaw to establish a procurement policy, and that council hereby repeal bylaw 17-2024.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Levesque. Background, please. Jennifer?
So staff are continuing to review and update existing policies, and during this process, the asset disposal policy was recognized that was due for a thorough review. During this review, it was noted that this policy would more effectively fit into the procurement policy. In the spring, the staff brought forward a new procurement policy. As staff implemented the policy, it became quite clear that certain positions needed the authority to purchase low-cost items in order to operate effectively. It is recommended that the department heads have the authority to delegate a purchase authority for goods under $5,000. Therefore, staff bring forward to you today a new bylaw to repeal and replace the procurement policy to include these items as noted.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Thompson, you're already on.
Sorry. I'm just curious how how it's managed. Is there like a purchase order system? Like the department head obviously still has full authority and knowledge. Just wondering, do they, get a $5,000 budget that they can spend, or how does it work? Thanks.
No, so ideally what it involves is that if a staff needs to be able to order an item, that they can quote it and price it. But, the supervisor's always in communication as to what's happening. It's just being able to, so when the invoices come in, that the supervisor doesn't, because I already, as the treasurer, approve them. So the supervisor doesn't have to sign off on the invoices as they come through.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? There are none seen. Call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to section 10.2, Council and Employee Expense Policy. Resolution, please.
The council approved policy 1-20, council expense policy, and 3-26, employee expense policy, and that council repeal policy 2-21, mileage allowance, and 3-04, travel policy.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Tripp. Background, please. I assume
I'll come in.
it's going to be the CAO. Okay.
So we've been reviewing policies, as the treasurer already mentioned, and there is a policy for expense for council and for staff. They're together, and then there's a mileage policy. So we've went in and separated them for a few reasons. I mean, the employee policy just is driven a bit differently than council, and when you review council, payments or whatnot, they're all within the same, like per term. So separate them made sense. Also, we had some, items such as the CRA or the meal rates were not adjusted for inflation. So for the new policy, the employee policy is very similar than it was before. The council expense policy has now also an amount for council members' expenses for budget. This doesn't change the budget for council. It just allows for a bit of an allocation. So within staff at the township, we're able to provide councillors with their budget and the amounts they have left over. It's just for tracking purposes for yourself. So the intent here is to pass the policy with, it's remaining within the budget that council has currently. And then as we move through this, we may decide over time, council may make changes to that, and we can do that too. If not, before the new term, the spring before the new term comes in, this council will review all council policies and remuneration. At that time, you'll have the ability to review and see what works and what hasn't worked. But this time, it's just a starting point for the policy.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from council? Councillor Tripp.
First comment is this is nice to see. It's good leadership to bring it forward. It gives us a bit of a base. And we recognize that we're not expanding the budget of council. We're just creating allocations within our circle. So we're spending money as councillors attending courses, or not so much courses, but conferences. Is there an opportunity either quarterly or biannually to post our expenses on the website? Other public agencies have a vehicle through which ratepayers or taxpayers can see how the money is being spent by council. So they'll get an idea of what we're doing in terms of attendance at conferences, and then from that down the road, perhaps the next discussion in a year or two is what's the return on investment? If we're attending conferences, how is that impacting our work to ratepayers? Just a thought. I'm not sure if it's available for this round or if it's something to park for future.
So presently, we do report the annual council remuneration statement in March of every year. It doesn't have a detailed list of items. Is that what you're looking for? Is that you want within those expenses itemized?
Not drilled down to specifics, but we have two elements. We have mileage for those of us who claim mileage. as a tracking mechanism. I'm thinking more in terms of, we attended, or Councillor Tripp attended the Roma conference, and the cost to that was $1,850 as the travel claim. So they see us attending conferences. They recognize what the cost is. We're staying within budget. It's just an issue of transparency in terms of how we're using their money to benefit the township. So not the specifics of everything in that package, but if my attendance at Roma was $1,500, that should be recorded for the public to see that we've expensed that, and then we're accountable to explain why and what's the return on investment. How did council benefit? How did the community benefit for us attending these conferences? Because right now we're just going, and there's no real transparency on our attendance other than the fact we went.
Supplemental or follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up to what Councillor Tripp was saying. I like the idea of showing basically what the money's going toward. Otherwise, it could be assumed we're just, blowing it on hats. That there is value for the money. So just, conferences, this much. Doesn't, could say the conferences or not, just mileage this much without having to break down meals, hotel, this. Thanks.
It's a good point. The council policy, expense policy that we bring forward today only allows you to claim expenses that are related to developing as a council member and representing yourself as a community. So the policy itself only allows you to spend expenses in conferences, or so if you're looking at the policy and then you look at the account, you can't spend just on anything. It has to be for council development. But we could look at possibly, itemizing on a high level what conferences were attended, or perhaps even a report at the end of the year.
Yeah, the same. I was going to say, even depending if you were talking about quarterly or biannually, council can direct us to, we can post what you would like. So it's your decision on what you'd like to see.
Any follow-up?
Thank you. I think biannually would be enough. I think quarterly is a little too much work, considering it's a relatively small amount of money. It's $3,700 for each of us. But I think there is an element of transparency that we should stand as accountable to. And I think if it is twice a year, residents have an opportunity to see how we as individuals are utilizing that $3,700 to advance the work of council and the support to the community.
Thank you. Any other follow-up? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, it's transparency. I mean, we know that council can't just blow it on hats, right? But the public just sees a figure. So that's why I'm saying it's not just to show what we're using it for, but to say this is being used appropriately. So that's kind of, it's public.
Thank you. Any other follow-up supplemental? Councillor Levesque.
Just a minor point on under the first paragraph under budget, it says councillor's expense with an apostrophe. I think we should put each councillors, just to be very clear that it's each councillor, because you could read that two ways. You could say it's the councillor's expense, or in this case, each. That's the only suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. And we move on to section 10.3, biannual finance update. This is an information item. Jennifer, is you taking the lead on this?
Yeah, so in your package today included a biannual financial update for 2024 with the 2024 variance report. This outlines the financial results from January 1st to September 30th, 2024 in comparison to the 2024 annual budget. And overall, our financial position looks strong at this stage in the year. Our revenues have been trending slightly higher and our expenses align with our expectations. Does anybody have any questions regarding the package?
Are there any questions from council? There are none seen. We will receive this as information. Thank you. We'll now move on to 10.4 OPP 2025 Annual Billing Statement Information Item. You're taking the lead on that, Jennifer.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So on September 19th, 2024, staff brought forward the 2025 budget direction indicating budget opportunities and pressures that would have to be considered for the 2025 budget. At this time, the township was aware that a new collective agreement had been ratified for the period of January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2026. However, we were not communicated yet the financial implications of this agreement. On October 4th, the township was provided with the OPP 2025 annual billing statement, and the resulting impacts of the ratified agreement are significant and summarized in your package. Basically, an increase of $142,000 annually, which includes a 2023 year-end adjustment of $37,000. This equates to a 3.34% municipal tax rate increase. This substantial increase is felt province-wide. The township has been in discussions with other neighboring municipalities within the county, which have all identified an average impact of 3.2% on their tax rate as well. So staff will address this challenge while working on solutions to ease the pressure on the 2025 operating budget, but we thought we'd bring this information forward to you today.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Popke.
I'm just curious how this $142,000 is going to help benefit our township. Like, what extra are they going to do that they're not doing now? Because I know out in Ward 2, we very rarely see any police presence. So it's a lot of money for getting nothing in return.
So their billing is based on calls per year and population count?
Yeah, it's based on a base rate and calls per year, but this doesn't include any change of services. This is simply the households and our calls we have, which have lowered over the last few years, and their increase in costs to operate is percentage throughout the townships.
Thank you. And this is also, Councillor Tripp.
Thank you. This is a substantial increase. And there's another part to this. In another few weeks, each of the townships in the 7 catchment areas of the police board will be receiving a second budget for the board that will need to be approved. It will be, in our case, depending on how it's shared between the 7 municipalities, it could be another half point. So policing costs are going to become increasingly challenging to meet. We are not alone, and it's not just within our catchment area. We're having discussions at the board level across the province of the issues of funding, and a lot of organizations or counties and townships are starting now to push back, saying we have to reevaluate the level of policing that we are able to pay for because some just don't have the money. Our increase is 140. There are those that are $500,000 or $1 million. So it's a significant impact on municipal budgets. But it's something that we can't at this point negate, but it's a larger discussion when we get into the budget exercise, because coming out of the gate, we're looking at a potential 3.4% increase before we talk about our own requirements at this table, as well as county and education. So it's going to put a lot of pressure on this year's cycle for budgeting. And I know it's coming up again. I think in item 12.2, we'll have a discussion about motions that have come forward from other municipalities to form a larger voice back to Queen's Park. But we're not alone, and there was an awful lot of discussion of a pushback to Queen's Park.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
You're on the police board? Yes. was the formation of the police board, is that supposed to eventually give us more say in the way things go and possibly rework the balance more equitably?
Through you, Mayor, there will be information materials coming to each of the 7 councils about the mandate of the board, but yes, the intent of the legislation under the new Community Police Services Act was to create independent boards that would have a very narrow scope of responsibility. And one is to establish priorities that we as our communities see as important in policing and present them to the OPP so that in their strategic plan, they try at best to include our priorities. We don't have the authority to direct policing, that's operational, but we can certainly outline what our priorities are, and then they're held accountable to how they've measured up in terms of the objectives of our priorities. So that's one which will be an information piece coming out. The legislation created the board, created, in our case, 7 councillors or elected officials, 2 community members, and 2 political appointees. We have not yet received the political appointees. We have just now received insurance for the board, so there's been a number of challenges in implementation, but we will be coming to the 7 municipalities with an information package. Once we can get our feet underneath us, we'll be able then to start working with municipalities to understand what the priorities are, and calls for service, presence in communities, are things that we then collectively as a board, through this table and through our community, collectively from the 7, provide a unified voice to the OPP as to what the community wants. So they've removed it from the political sphere, which in the past under the old act was singular boards owned by the municipality. So it's going to take a little while for the implementation, but now that the insurance is in place and the structure is there, things will move quicker.
Thank you. Councillor Levesque?
So I think overall, right now, we're talking about a budget issue, which has been increased substantially. And back to your point, Councillor Popke, that the issue that I see is the drastic change in the budget versus the last few years, because it's been pretty constant. And as we discovered, it's due mainly because of the collective agreement that was reached. The problem is the way they do their budgeting impacts everybody else. And you know, we may have to put some things in place to ensure that we don't get caught like the OPP does. Like, I don't even know how they budget for it, because if they're that far behind in collecting revenue or paying out expenses, I mean, you can't expect any organization to withstand that. They don't put that I don't believe they would put that money aside. It would have to come from somewhere. So all of a sudden now you have a 40% increase in expenses that you didn't have the year before. It's impossible to budget for that. The second part about that, and I think your point is correct, is value for money. So even though it's increasing, that's a lag in the collective agreement, but the overall thing, and we brought this up before, is the value for money, because we don't receive, as a rural township, we don't receive a lot of proactive policing. We see a lot of reactive policing. So we don't see cruising like we would in a municipality or a city. We don't see police cruisers. Ironically, as we were seeing in Canada, there was a police cruiser that drove by. So, you know, we don't know what that looks like. We do have our annual report from OPP, and it shows the number of calls they've received and so on. So we do see what they're doing, but we don't know the details behind that and how they actually arrive and to determine what those costs are. I mean, I guess nonetheless, you know, the budget is what it is, and they have to come back to us to be accountable for what they do through a reporting mechanism. But I think we only get a written report, correct? We don't have anybody presenting anything to us or to that regard.
We do have the capability of asking them to come and present to us, but it would be definitely high level, and it would just be presenting the findings of the report we would have attached to this.
Thank you. Councillor Tripp?
Thank you. Part of the changes that are happening within the OPP under this new legislation is they're now mandated to report more frequently through the board, and then the board to each municipality. We're mandated to do an annual report by June, which is a very detailed statistical analysis. But reporting back to the OPP, we also have that opportunity to lay down our priorities, which gets we'll eventually get to the point where we have discussions around presence, call for service, areas we see in terms of improvement. We also have the opportunity to have a dialogue about whether we're getting value for money and how do they make adjustments with their machinery to meet our financial needs. So that will eventually develop, hopefully over the next 12 months. And the budget increase, as I understand it, is predominantly based to the recent renegotiation and discussion around rate, salary. So I don't think this is a budget based on operational. I think this increase is based on the cost as a result of the arbitration that came out with employee costs.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns from council? Councillor Popke.
So theoretically, what would happen if we refuse to pay the 142,000?
Well, we'd probably be in breach of a provincial contract. I assume that we would be taken to court since it is provincially mandated. And but I'm not sure. I hadn't thought of that possibility because unlike some smaller communities, we don't have our own police force, and nor could we afford to have one. And we need some governance over it. But yeah, I don't think that would be a wise decision. But to answer your question, I don't know exactly. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? Okay. I'll speak a little bit on this. I think Councillor Levesque spoke properly when he mentioned that a lot of it is the billing from the OPP, that they're not forecasting in advance new ratifications of salaries. If they were forecasting new ratifications of salaries, they could forecast it in our expense year over year, and thus we wouldn't have a situation like this where we have to now put at 3.4% taxation on our levies. It would be something that would increase over year. So their funding model and their billing model is definitely lacking that. The other part of that too is, as Councillor Tripp said about reporting, and everybody said basically about reporting, one of the things that is time spent within a municipality. So all the police cars have GPSs and they can track. So I'm gonna take it outside of Greater Madawaska at this time though. So if in fact there was a OPP car going to a call that had to leave Arnprior and go to Renfrew for the call, so they are on call, but the time they spent on 17 would be allotted to McNabb Braeside. So I think one of the things we need, and I don't know how we would get this information, is for the amount of time that they're spent in Greater Madawaska, suppose they're going to Monashear or something, they're responding to calls and they happen to be on 508. That is not time spent within our community for our response. It is, so what we would need to know is, okay, for that vehicle that you're saying is in our community, what was their status? Were they clear? Were they responding to a call in Greater Madawaska? Were they responding to a call in another municipality and we're just getting the time allotted to us? So there's lots of things we can look at to get a higher quality of reporting. One of the other things too, and I don't know whether the OPP does it, but a lot of other municipal police forces in Ontario do, is each morning they put out a morning report of what's happened in the last 24 hours. I've gone to our OPP site and I haven't been able to find that they put out a morning report to say how many officers were on the road, what was their allocation, what were the calls for service. And I think that might be something that we can bring up and broach through the board itself to say, if all these other police forces around the municipal forces put out a morning report, and they put it out to the media too, so that they have an understanding, and they talk about arrests, they talk about statistics, impaired charges, POAs. That type of reporting is something that would be useful to us so that we can have a tracking of, say, and it would be useful for the OPP for year-end statistics as well. And they may very well put out a morning report to their other districts or divisions, but I can't locate it. So that's something that we can look at as well to get a better understanding of how much time is being spent. And Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Weir. And you are on point. The OPP is looking at, again, under this new legislation, one standardized reporting process that will go to all OPP detachments. So it's going to be much more robust than what we've been seeing in the past, but it will have all of that micro data in it. It will be a standard report, so each municipality will be receiving the same information from their OPP detachments. But they've taken that into consideration. I don't know at this stage if it's going to be a morning report, but certainly calls for service, time spent on site, and then the stats in terms of what's happening. So it is something that is relatively new for all of us. The legislation just came in April 1, and they're working diligently to look at, because they're mandated to report with more efficiency and effectiveness back to the municipalities. It's put the community policing into the act, that the communities have a responsibility and a certain authority to lay down the priorities that they see as best for the OPP, but also to have that information coming back that they want. So that window is certainly open at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we also have to take this, let's say, away from the OPP and a municipality and think of it as they are the business and we are the client. And as we expect from our IT groups and any of our external companies that we use, we get good reporting on them and get good reporting that we need. So I think we just need to take a holistic look and say, we are the clients, you are the business, you're providing us a service, show us you're providing us a service. Thank you. Any further comments, questions? There are none seen, and this was an information item, so thank you very much. We'll now move on to 11.1, Recreation and Culture Committee. Councillor Levesque. And just, sorry to interrupt, Councillor Levesque has provided council with a write-up.
Thank you. This won't take too long. Just to keep everybody apprised of what's happening within the committee. Just some brief notes. On September 24th, we brought in a local resident, Colin Sutherland, and he was selected as a successful candidate for the committee following a resignation of a previous member. So now we're back to full strength of 6 committee members. On October 15th, Michelle Kobzik was nominated and accepted the chair of the committee. So we've been without a chair for the last couple of meetings. So thank her for that. And it's been a good addition to the committee. Just to keep everybody up to date, the Greater Madawaska Activity Showcase has been set for November 23rd, 2024. And this is a full-day event where individuals, groups, and businesses that focus on activity-based items can come and present what they do to the public. It's a free event, free for the people participating as well as the anybody who's going to it to see what people do. Again, the idea, where this idea came from was that when we did our survey a while back, we discovered a lot of comments around people not knowing that we had certain things available. And there were actually things that were out there that people weren't aware of. So this is a good way to not just communicate, but also involve people in the community as well. Shifting into the 2025 goals and priorities, again, stemming from the survey that we did a while back. We've been looking at all of the various feedback and items that people are requesting. And we're now breaking things down into buckets of stuff that the current offerings and programs that we currently have, new offerings, and what we kind of bucketed things into a learn to or intro type programs. So they could be things from like swimming lessons or intro to archery or those kinds of things. And also drop-in scenarios where it's kind of a free form. And also affiliated programs, so where we feel that we can't or may not be able to provide certain things for the community, we might be able to reach out to various related or nearby townships and municipalities to help identify what they are and how we can participate in those with them. And that's something to make available to our local residents. And through that, we've talked about how do we either entice or incentivize that to happen. So those are things that we have to learn about and determine what can be done. And then the larger offerings, these are the more significant items that might have a capital and operating impact, and those items would be brought forward to council to determine approval, what's any gaps that we may have in what we determine what the priorities might be. Once the priorities are determined, then the committee will report back to council with the outcome and the plans. And through this, the committee is anticipating needs for some of this and a small budget to support some of these anticipated events. So I'll give you an example. One of the thoughts currently is a music in the park scenario. We may have one or two as an example for next summer, so it's going to require some funding up front potentially for bands and those kinds of things. So we may need some money for those, but they haven't been determined as yet. But I have been speaking with staff, and there is some reserve budget available for recreation items that we would be utilizing toward that. But in any event, the committee would bring those things forward for approval and take it from that point forward. That's all for this point. Again, the next meeting is in November, and we'll be going through this in more detail and hopefully come up with a little more structure and a lot more priority in terms of what we're going to be doing.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns, discussions? Councillor Thompson.
I think this is wonderful, getting all the groups together. One thing, Ward 3, we've got a very, actually next to us in Addington Highlands, we've got the Denby Recreation Group that's, over the last few years, they have a whole new group, a lot like the energy that's going on here. And they've put some really good things together, but then there's, and it serves our area. There should be, have you given thought to coordinating so that if we have an event in Ward 3, that it doesn't conflict with an event that'll draw our people that are in Addington Highlands? And this is a committee of council as well, so I'm just wondering how to manage that.
Yes.
There we go.
No, I'm just teasing. Yeah, we do in fact, that came up at the last meeting. Items that Denby's doing. That part of the gap we do have, though, is we have only one member from Ward 2, and she's actually reaching out to those other wards as well, including Denby, and she's quite familiar with those areas. So yes, as things do progress and we start identifying those things, the idea is to not just get across the entire township, but also to reach out around the township as well. So that's definitely a focal point.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? None? On just one comment on the Greater Madawaska Activity Showcase. I'm just wondering if the Rec Committee has thought to reach out to the Ottawa Valley Tourism Association to help them promote it for us?
Thank you. Yeah, that came up as well as the other one, which I closed the link. There's Ottawa Valley Tourism and the Highlands.
OHTO.
Yeah. So that's on the docket to engage them and be part of that. So either invite them to participate with us and have them available, not just for people coming in to see what the other activities are, but also for the activities themselves, to engage with them while they're there. So I think we're gonna reach out to them for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? None seen. Thank you for the information item. We'll now move on to 12.1, Alternative Recreational Trail. Motion brought forward by Councillor Tripp.
That council directs the CAO to explore opportunities for the development of an alternative recreational trail exiting the KMP trail between Flower Station and Taddy Hill and reconnecting into the village of Calabogie with a focus of minimizing residential impact, and to report back to council with findings and recommendations for council's consideration in the spring of 2025.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Popke. Background, please. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor. So this motion was brought forward with the intent of doing a review of opportunities to redirect traffic coming off of the KMP between Flower Station and Taddy Hill, and looking for potential redirection of that traffic back into connecting to Calabogie. And there are a number of options, either through existing trails that already exist and connecting those to the exit off of the KMP, or to look at new trails. The genesis for this, we've had ratepayers living on the existing KMP trail, members in Berryville and residents of Bluff Point, who have expressed concerns with just the current traffic and then potential future traffic with population growth passing through their areas. We've also had discussions or interest from existing organizations in the recreational area. So groups like Tom Irwin Adventures, the Renfrew ATV program, a bicycle program, looking also for or welcoming the opportunity for an alternative path into the Calabogie village where they're not going through residential area or over hard pavement. Recently, there has been a bit of a resurgence in opportunities through the Trans-Canada Trail program. Work with the Ontario Highlands Tourist Association in terms of this 350 cycle route that would connect the Algonquin Trail, the Ottawa Valley Trail, Cataraqui out of Kingston, and the K&P. They're starting now to look, not in terms of the trail development, but really innovative developments of the existing trail. The timing, I thought, was right to start scoping out what opportunities may be for the trail coming into Calabogie and a redirection. The motion that I struck to bring forward would be to ask council or have council direct staff to explore opportunities for alternative routes as a mean to connect the existing KMP into the downtown Calabogie core. Encouraging them to work with County of Renfrew. County of Renfrew had a trails committee. They still have. We were part of that, but then it moved more to the Algonquin Trail and the work going on. But to liaise with County of Renfrew and neighboring counties and related associations and institutions, and to align with the federal government Trans-Canada Trail and Trail Tourism Plan. A major component would be to look for federal and provincial options to ensure or to negate the need of tax-based revenue. And as we talked about earlier, we're going to have tax implications with increase in OPP. This is not something I think should come from the tax base because it doesn't lay across all elements of our community. It is for a very narrow scope, and I think it should be funded outside of the tax funding. And to look at opportunities. We're not expecting, and for council to come back spring or even late spring with options and considerations to start scoping out areas where we might want to start looking at. We're not looking, I think it's unrealistic to expect a plan in the spring, but to start that discussion and start bringing people around the table who would be interested in dialogue around looking for an alternative method.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from council? Councillor Levesque?
Well, it's more of a comment or a question. I think given your role on the county, and I think you're on a committee that would be related to this, it'd be good to hear from you first. Usually you go at the end, but it'd be good to hear your background and what your thoughts are on this before we speak, if we choose to. If that's okay.
I could do that for this one occasion. I usually reserve my position to speak till the end. So in this situation, the Eastern Ontario counties are developing a loop, 350-kilometer loop that is basically based down south of us with a small portion coming into us to join up with the KMP. And that's Councillor Popke and I went down to the launch of that, I guess 2 weeks ago now, and it was very well received. And they're more focusing on creating a loop that brings them to the north and then back south, touching slightly upon us at the very southern part of our KMP. As far as the development and property goes, yes, they are developing the Algonquin Trail, but they are not opening up any new trails. That is not in the forecast. It is to develop trails that are already in existence and the connectivity of those trails. There are some sections up in Petawawa that's part of the railroad was sold off to private ownership deeded ownership years ago. They're trying to work with people up that area because it is not only for snowmobiles and ATVs, but also for horses and bicycles and pedestrians. So they're working, but they're not looking to establish any new trails. So that's one thing to bring forward. The other is, I'm not sure where the closest connection to the Trans-Canada Trail is to us. Councillor Tripp, do you have any knowledge on that?
Well, part of the existing circuit with the Algonquin and the Cataraqui coming up in that part of that loop money is coming out of the Trans-Canada program for some of that development. This is not talking about creating a new trail. It's connecting. It's almost as a bridge program coming off of the trail and connecting to the trail in Calabogie. Not sure if that answers the question, but it's part of that bigger process about connectivity with the trail system. And we have the break now where traffic is currently going through commercial land, which is not ideal, and looking for an option that would provide more permanency for connecting to the existing trail in Calabogie.
Okay, and I'll follow up with a supplemental. At this time, after hearing that staff is going to have to be working very diligently and hard on our budgeting numbers, which will include possible reduction in service in some areas, might be having to downscale some areas. They're going to have to be, over the next few months going into spring of 2025, they're going to be having to do a lot of work. And because we are now dealing with a 3.4% tax increase, I would like to see staff's time and efforts to be used on how do we reduce the taxation on our residents. And I think time would be better spent on that, as well as all of their other daily duties, that this could be brought back at a later date. But right now, I think there's a lot of stuff on staff's plate, and for capacity, I would suggest that we not do this at this time. And now I'll open the floor to the rest of the councillors. Councillor Thompson.
Working on the budget is a normal process, whether you need to cut back on things or not. So I don't think that's giving an undue burden. But I think there is a lot of uncertainty around what the possibilities for the future are for the trail. And I think we need to at least assure our residents that we are in the process of looking at alternatives rather than having the trail go through populated areas. So maybe if spring 2025 isn't practical, and that should be left up to staff, we can say, yes, please start the process. Can we say, and let us know when you think you might have a reasonable timeframe? Can we do that?
Councillor Tripp.
I think the vision in terms of putting forward the motion was not to burn a lot of staff time, but to get the process started at a cerebral level initially, and then bringing together teams that would go and spearhead some early thinking. We have members in the community have expressed interest in developing ideas around their knowledge of the existing landscape and coming back to staff. I don't see there will be some setup time to get the people around the table, but I think the majority of the work initially to inform staff on opportunities and options that make sense would come from people in the community who have indicated an interest in this area. I also think, our budget discussions, as Councillor Thompson said, are in this cycle, but late spring is a long way off, and I would assume that most of our budget deliberations are going to be from our table over the coming months and then early into January. but there's February, March, April, and May. There's a lot of time in that window. We're not looking for something to come back after Christmas or January, February. Give the time, but I think it's important to put the pin in the map and that we start listening to the community's needs and look for options and opportunities. We're not guaranteeing we're going to come with a solution, but we need to get out and start looking at and considering options going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Levesque?
So that was, I guess, the latter part would be the concern that you brought up about staff time and what that would really mean. I don't know if we know what that means yet. And to your point, Councillor Tripp, what would that look like in terms of, would you form a subcommittee? Like, what would that look like? So if we land this on staff's, work plan, what does that really mean? Does it mean 40% of their time? Does it mean 10% of their time with supplement from committees or other professionals or consultants? And I don't know if we know that at this point, but I think it would be helpful, if we could somehow scope the doing of the work out to determine a decision. So right now, I think there's a fundamental decision about doing the work, is this something we should do? But then the other thing is how will it be carried out and what the cost of that would be? Because I think that does have a bearing on the decision. So whether we decide this today or whether we come back at a later date to determine what does that look like, it would be more my question.
Councillor Thompson?
I suggest maybe it's time to listen to the CAO and see if this is something that is reasonable for you to take on, for your staff to take on.
So from all the comments I've received, I mean, at this point, I'd just be scoping because I need to see what that looks like. What can we do in-house? What can we do externally? I mean, a lot of this work, I think, would involve probably a consultant, a specialist. And so there's funds attached to that. And it's not cost less because as soon as you pull me into a different project, it's just time that's not used on another project, right? But at this point, I mean, I take direction from council. If you want me to explore this, I can explore it and then come back with some option on how we could proceed, which is similar a bit to the last direction I received with the medical or improving health services, where I'm now in just a scope mode, going into developing a work plan and then seeing how council wants to proceed. At that point, I'll be in a better position to be able to determine what can happen and what that timeline looks like.
Thank you. Councillor Levesque? Oh,
Just quickly on that, thank you, Renee. The question also in coming back with that would be what other things may not happen as a result. So looking back at the strategic plan and the items that we rolled out for the work plan, the overall current work plan, what of those things may not happen as a result?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying with the work plan is I would have to and council would have to evaluate what they would like to see in prioritizing.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Councillor Popke?
It's not only going to be like our township that will be responsible for building these trails or looking at it. I'm sure we can get help from different organizations like the Snowmobile Club would be more than willing to help out with their expertise and experience. I also sit on the board of Mississippi Valley Conservation Committee. That's all their watershed from Flower Station all in through just this side of Taddy Hill. I could reach out to them and see if they could offer some assistance or insight on direction, which way to go, and if it's even possible.
Thank you. Councillor Tripp?
So these comments are very much in line with the initial motion. We're not talking about going and solving this issue or getting a shovel and digging a trail. It's asking our CAO or directing staff to scope out opportunities, and it is just this dialogue we're having now. There are a number of institutions that have expressed interest, like the Snowmobile Club. There's a hiking group. Tom Irwin has a number of people that are in this industry and would be prepared to come in an ad hoc format, even before the consideration of a committee, to give opportunities and options for Renee to then put against the work plan and come back late spring with opportunities going forward. So the discussion earlier about bringing a consultant in, which may be one of the options, but funding to provide support for that consultant. I think the pivoting point here is that this does not become a taxed base initiative. It needs to be funded on its own, not coming from our ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns, discussion? Well, at this time, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is 4. Opposed? 1. Thank you. Motion carried. We'll now move on to 12.2, OPP funding, resolution of support. Resolution, please.
The council support resolution number 229 carried April 23rd, 2024 by the Council of the Municipality of Tweed requesting the Ontario government to immediately implement sustainable funding for small rural municipalities by reabsorbing the cost of the Ontario Provincial Police Force back into the provincial budget with no cost recovery to municipalities.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Popke, second by Councillor Thompson. Do you want to read the background or the resolution, or would you like me to?
You see attached to the agenda Tweed's resolution. It really aligns with the conversation we just had about the police, the OPP increases and the impacts on small municipalities. So we're going to start seeing, similar to 2015 when they adjusted the police billing model, a push across the province to make adjustments to the OPP structure when it comes to funding it through municipalities. So this is the first one, and we are just looking for support to support the motion from Tweed.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council? No, I'd just like to say that I received this today, and sorry for the late notice on this, but it's something that needs to be acted upon very quickly in light of the funding model that we just received from the OPP. And Tweed very eloquently put out the amount of money that is being spent, 9.1 billion in Toronto, where the increase for OPP has gone up 2.8. So that's a fraction of what's being spent in Toronto. And that doesn't even include the money that's being spent on the Highway 407, 474. So I think this is very timely for us to put forward. And I know that this actual resolution is going to be discussed tomorrow at the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus as well. So it's very timely for us to speak to it. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of supporting? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. We're now at section 13.1. Enter into closed session. Resolution, please.
That the council meeting of October 17th, 2024 enter into closed session at 4:27 p.m. pursuant to section 293(2) of the Municipal Act regarding 1, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal and local board employees, specifically A, committee members, and B, CAO performance review.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Tripp. All in favor to move into close? Thank you. We will be moving into close. Thank you. We have concluded our closed session, and we now move into open 14.1.
That the council meeting of October 17th, 2024 move back into open session at 4:57 PM.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Levesque, second by Councillor Tripp. All in favor to move into open? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you. 15.1, move to rise and report resolution, please.
That council reports the following as a result of the closed meeting item. 1, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, specifically A, committee members. That council consider the following resolution as discussed in close. Okay. And then B, CAO performance review discussion item and directors as closed.
Thank you. Do we have a mover, please? Councillor Popke, second by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous, so carried. We'll now need to do a committee members resolution.
That council approve the appointment of the following members of the public to the 2025 Canada Day Committee: Jane Weir, Cheryl Grass, Emily Thompson, and Jean Libby. And furthermore, the council appoint Councillor Tripp as a council representative on the committee.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Levesque. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. I believe we move on to 16.1, bylaw approval resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the following bylaw, 56-2024 confirmatory, be deemed read a first, second, and final time and passed by council at the regular council meeting held October 17th, 2024.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Tripp, second by Councillor Levesque. All in favor? That is carried. 17.1, motion to adjourn. Resolution, please.
That the regular council meeting of October 17th, 2024 be adjourned at 4:59 PM.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Popke. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you very much. That concludes our regular council meeting for today.